Okay. Hi everyone, this is Ryan. I'm doing a brief overview on the Telekinetics Sage DPS. The TK Sage is long range, very mobile DPS. It can do very good burst damage and is very good at target swapping. You don't have to build up all your dots, which is your damage over time abilities like some other classes do. As I said, it's very mobile, so most of your abilities can be done while moving. Makes it very easy to avoid AoE damage and position yourself properly. It's also a lot easier because you don't have to worry about a set ability rotation or your force or energy management. It's more of a priority list, which makes it just a bit easier. Okay, so if we look at the combat proficiencies and utilities, which is what builds up this particular spec, the utilities are spread over the skillful, masterful, and heroic levels. You get 3 of each. So the 3 I use in the skillful are Jedi Resistance, which increases damage reduction by 3%. Just helps you survive a bit better. Tectonic Mastery, this increases the damage done by Force Quake by 25%. This is just largely useful at clearing ad groups quicker, especially on boss fights where a lot of ads need to be killed quickly. And Pain Bearer, which increases all healing received by 5%. It just makes it easy for the healers to keep you alive. If you're going to be doing a fight where there's not much AoE damage you need to do, then the other one you can take is Mind Ward, which reduces the damage taken by all periodic effects by 15%. So a fight where a lot of dots go out or there's a lot of just constant ticking damage, that will reduce the damage on that. In the Masterful, I take Blockout, which means that your Cloud Mind, which is your threat drop, also increases your damage reduction by 25% for 6 seconds. So not only does it mean less people are going to attack you, it also helps you survive any incoming damage for a little bit better. The next one is Valiance, which reduces the damage taken by the target of your rescue by 25%. That's sort of not important, you can ignore that, but it does increase the healing done by your Force Mend by 30%. Your Force Mend is your large self-heal, which can get you out of trouble quite easily. And the last one is Telekinetic Defense, which makes your Force Armor, which is your bubble like this, it makes that rebound some damage back on the attacker. It's not a lot of damage, but it is a little bit that helps. In the Heroic, we take Mental Defense, which reduces all damage taken while stunned by 30% and all damage from area effects by 30%. A lot of boss fights have a lot of area effects which do a lot of damage, so reducing that by 30% is very helpful. We also take Force Mobility, which means your turbulence, well, it's only turbulence for the TK Sage that we worry about here, can be activated while moving. Again, just helping with the mobility and being able to move while attacking. The last one we take is Valorous Spirit, which reduces the cooldown of your Force Mend and gives you an extra damage reduction of 15% when you use Force Mend. Again, just helping to reduce damage taken, which as a Sage, you only have light armor, so damage reduction is very important. A lot of the extra abilities you get as you level up change the way your abilities work and help a lot. So if you read through them, a brief understanding is all you really need, because a lot of it you get anyway just through using your abilities. Some of those we'll look into more detail as we actually go through the abilities though. Okay, so next we will have a bit of a look at the gear. First thing is your set piece. So for the Telekinetics Sage, the best one is the Gathering Storm. This as a 6-piece, well, as a 2-piece gives you plus 2% mastery. As a 4-piece, your force speed makes your next direct force attack deal 20% more damage, and force attacks deal 20% more damage while mental alacrity is active. So using force speed will make your next attack do more damage. And with 6 pieces, the duration of mental alacrity is increased by 5 seconds, and using force speed reduces the active cooldown of mental alacrity by 5 seconds. Mental alacrity is one of your boosts that increases how fast and the speed at which you can attack, so you want to be able to use that as much as you can. Once you get a 6 piece of those, the 7th piece should be an amplified champions piece. This gives a damage boost ability instead of the regular crafting boost ability on that piece. The suggestion is to put it on your headpiece, and the only reason for that is because if you're fighting Dreadtooth and you need to wear a specific helmet, you can swap the helmet out and still keep the rest of your 6-piece active. A few notes on what stats you should be aiming for. You of course need to try and get as close as you can to 110% accuracy. This is because bosses have a resistance amount, and 110% accuracy means that all of your attacks will hit. Anything less than that and you will start being resisted and start missing attacks, which is the last thing you want. Anything above 110% accuracy is wasted stats, and you'd be better using that for something else. The other thing you want to aim for is around 11.5% alacrity. You can look closely at exactly the calculations based on that, but the 11.5% plus when you're in combat, your abilities give you an extra 5%, which will get you to 16.5%, and that shortens your global cooldown to 1.3 seconds, and when you use mental alacrity it'll be 1.1 seconds. There's different stages there, but that's just what you should aim for. The rest you should focus on critical and hopefully get over 40% crit chance. The next thing we'll look at is your tactical. The best tactical for the Sage is Stormwatch. Whenever you use Telekinetic Gust, it applies Stormwatch to its targets for the next 10 seconds whenever the target takes damage from Weakened Mind, Mind Crush, or Turbulence, which you use a lot. A Force Gust is called down upon the target, dealing kinetic damage, which basically turns into another dot, because whenever you use any of those abilities, it's going to have another small attack hit the target. There are some others that do pretty well and they sound good, but they don't quite match the amount of damage that they add. One of those is Erin's Haste, which force speed gives you an additional Clamoring Force stack, so that's the one that buffs your next force attack to make it do more damage. It's not really that crucial. It allows Turbulence to be activated instantly, but that doesn't really help you either, because the cast time of Turbulence is about 1.3 seconds, which is around what your global cooldown is anyway, so it doesn't actually save you any time. And TK Burst and Turbulence deal more damage while Clamoring Force is active. It's a little bit more damage, but again, it's not enough to make it better than Stormwatch. Okay, so if we have a bit of a look at most of your abilities, one important thing is Weakened Mind, which is your main dot, so your main damage over time effect. It weakens the target's mind, dealing internal damage over 18 seconds. Because it's such a long time, it actually ends up doing most of the damage. It's one of your highest damage dealing effects, and for any boss you should only need to apply it once, because using Telekinetic Gust or Telekinetic Wave refreshes the cooldown. So if you apply it, you should always be able to see that this debuff is on your target. The main reason for that is that it's doing constant damage, and it means that your next Turbulence will automatically crit. Another point, Mind Crush is your other damage over time ability. It's also very important because it actually puts a debuff on the target that increases the force damage taken by it by 5%. so it's important to use that whenever you can, but you should never cast it without casting Telekinetic Gust first, which will make it glow, and that reduces the cast time. Otherwise, it just takes too long to cast. The other thing you should never channel to cast is Telekinetic Wave. That is another hard-hitting ability of yours, but a lot of your other abilities will proc it to finish the cooldown on it and make it an instant cast. I'll just do that again. So if it's glowing, it will instantly cast, and you don't have to channel it. It's just not worth sitting there and channeling it. It takes too long. Another one of your abilities you have is Telekinetic Blitz. Just ignore that. Maybe later they'll fix it, but at the moment it just doesn't do enough damage to be worthwhile using. Your main filler ability is going to be Telekinetic Burst, which doesn't have a cooldown. It's a 1.3 second channel. And the other benefit is it gives you a lot of your extra buffs. So if we look at some of the buffs that have popped up here, that one increases your alacrity. It stacks up to 5 times, and that's your extra 5% alacrity. It also reduces increases your force regeneration, so you never run out of force unless you're off healing. And it also increases your damage reduction, so again making you take less damage. Some of your damage boosting abilities. So Mental Alacrity is your alacrity increase. It grants an extra 20% alacrity for 20 seconds, which makes you attack faster, cast your abilities faster, and yes, just a speed increase. You also have Force Potency, which grants 2 charges of Force Potency. This increases your Force critical chance by 60%, which basically guarantees that the next 2 abilities you use are going to crit. One important thing to note is that even though Turbulence casted on an enemy with Weakened Mind on it will automatically crit, using a Force Potency charge on a Turbulence will make it do what they call a super crit, which will then further increase the damage over what a normal crit would be. It ends up adding about an extra 10,000 damage to that attack. The other one you want to try and use your second charge on would be the Telekinetic Wave, as that's your next highest instant hit ability. And you should always try and use Telekinetic Wave as your second charge of Force Potency, because if you use it as the first charge, it will likely use both charges in one attack. You should not use Force Potency with something like Mind Crush, because it will only automatically crit the initial hit of the attack and not the ongoing damage over time ticks. Some of your defensive cooldowns are, of course, your Force Armor, which protects you for a certain amount of damage. It will do a certain amount of damage back at the boss if you take direct damage from the boss. It also increases your damage reduction, so you take less damage after, even when it expires, thanks to the Force Imbalanced. It's not as obvious. Your other main one is, of course, your Force Mend, which is your instant self-heal. If you notice that you're down to half health and there's a lot of people that have some health missing, just use that. It'll help out the healers a lot. Your other one, of course, is Cloud Mind, which is your threat drop, and it also gives you extra damage reduction, so you want to use that when you can too, especially if you're taking a lot of damage. Force of Will is your break out of a stun ability. Restoration is your cleanse. So of course, if you have a damage over time ability or something on yourself, you can cleanse that off using that. The other main one is Force Barrier, which is also known as a Oh No bubble, which basically prevents you taking any damage whatsoever for 8 seconds. That's on a 2-minute cooldown though. Sorry, it's almost 3 minutes. So you also don't want to use that unless there's a lot of damage you really need to avoid. One other thing, with the Force Speed, it reduces your mental alacrity cooldown and gives you instant cast telekinetic bursts. It'll give you 2 of those, and it makes your next force attack deal more damage. So what you really want to do is build that into whenever you're going to do a turbulence, that you do a force speed first, because that's the best attack to increase the damage on. AoE attacks, you've got your Force Quake, which really 3 enemies or more is ideal for Force Quake, especially since it will proc your Telekinetic Wave, instant cast, and between those two, they're very good just to clear out any groups of adds. So, as I said, the Telekinetics Sage isn't really a forced rotation that you have to do to manage your energy or line your attacks up. It's more of a priority system. So if you start the fight, you of course want to start with your weakened mind before you do any turbulence. You want to use turbulence as your main priority on cooldown, as well as the instant cast telekinetic wave. You also want to use your mind crush whenever you can, but only after you've done the telekinetic gust to make that an instant, lesser channel time on that. As I said, telekinetic burst is your filler ability. Project, which is your throw rock. You can use it if you need to have another ability where you're moving and you don't have an instant cast telekinetic burst, but you have more benefits from using a telekinetic burst instead, and the damage difference isn't terribly much. Having said that, if your enemy is affected by Mind Crush, the project does more damage, so you really shouldn't use project unless you've only recently cast Mind Crush. Another thing is you should only use you should try and use Force Potency immediately after clicking Mental Alacrity, as this will reduce the cooldown on that because of your higher alacrity. And just to go back to the gear, we have the amplifier you want to aim for as a force-wielding class dealing damage is Force Sensitivity, which increases the damage dealt by your force attacks. The gold one on that gives you an extra 1%. So over all your pieces, you end up with an extra 9% damage to your force attacks. Not that that makes a terrible amount of difference, but it's just what you should be aiming for. Looking into specific pieces, you can look closer at exactly which ones are better, but as a rule of thumb, any of the armorings, mods and enhancements you're going to put in, just aim for the ones with lower endurance compared to the other stats. As a damage dealer, you're not after having as much health as you can, but you want as much power, as much mastery, as much critical as you can, so you can deal more damage. And I think that is just about it. If you have any questions, just ask me whenever you need.